Did Tet McMillan run a 4.48? And did he shake up the draft board for the Jaguars? I'll answer that and more today here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
There's never a doubt that it is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars, and we thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where you can find wherever you get your podcast. That's right. Whatever you do, make sure wherever you get them, whether you watch them or listen to them, you tap in to Locked On Jaguars so you do not miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's right. FanDuel is the absolute truth. No, it's truth. Y'all are, man. So I got to give y'all this podcast today. We're going to end this show by talking about how I like the fact that the Jaguars are so confident that they're not going to look like they're not going to hedge their bets. And I'll explain exactly what that means. Leaving room for players being drafted and how that is a bold move. There's a very, very bold move. Some people think bold moves means like the guys that you pick. No. Sometimes it's the intent for the guys that you pick, and that's what we're going to discuss here today. We're going to start the show by talking about Tedoroa McMillan. We call him Tet Mac. That's what we'll do because I got a habit of boggling some people's names up really, really bad. So I'll just go Tet Mac or Tet McMillan when it comes to the wide receiver prospect out of Arizona. Is he in play at number 5 for the Jacksonville Jaguars? I don't know the answer to that question, but I would assume that everybody's in play because the Jaguars are picking 5th, and I think they're going to want to get a player that in most drafts they won't be able to get if they're having the kind of success that they want to have. Most of the times teams, especially teams that have new general managers and like the new GM here, James Gladstone, there's this hope and optimism that comes along with it that we ain't going to be picking here too much longer. Now, I know Jaguar fans are like, we've said that for a number of years, and we've ended up in the top 5 over and over again. Like, I would have never imagined after last season or the last 2 previous seasons under Doug Peterson that 2024 would have landed the Jaguars with a top 5 draft pick. I wasn't that pessimistic, or even I didn't lack the optimism enough to think that the Jaguars would be picking this high this year. There are some that believe that this draft, like the 5 players in this draft, would be the second 5 players in any other draft. I got to tell y'all, man, you got to watch that kind of stuff. And the reason why I'll get on that for a second is because there were other drafts like 2013 where folks was like, man, this is a weak draft. So overall, it probably was. But then, I counted like 4 guys that are probably going to be first ballot Hall of Famers in that draft. And it seems like the teams that got those people, like the 2 that come to mind right now is Lane Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins. Those 2, one at the front and one in the very back of that draft. And then there were some other players chosen in those drafts that turned out to be really, really good NFL players. And there are some teams that were lucky enough to get a whole bunch of them, right? Like multiple players in that draft that turned out to be good. You have to just make sure you get what you can get. So the reason why I said you have to watch that is because if you'd have listened last year, no one would have included Brian Thomas Jr. In the category of great player in any draft. I mean, he went 20th or 23rd, either one of them. He went there last year. Just imagine that. The dude is a top 7, top 8 wide receiver, and he looks like he's headed for superstardom if everything stays on course and on track. And he was picked in the 20s. So don't let people tell you that drafts aren't good and that you can't find gold in these drafts. So the Jaguars are picking 5th. I really think that they can find an intangibly rich player at number 5. Tet McMillan, one of them, that's who we're going to discuss today. We talked about Mason Graham over the weekend, and I saw the numbers, and you guys really, really ate that up. So we'll go with Tet McMillan today since he ran a 4.48 40 time, according to draft experts, 24 people that were there, 24 NFL teams that was represented at his workout at Arizona. At 6'4", 220 pounds, That's a hell of a time for a guy that big. That's a good time for a lot of people, right? But that's a heck of a time for a wide receiver who has that catch radius, that leaping ability, and who runs the routes the way that Tet McMillan runs. So the Jaguars are going to have a very, very big decision. Do you fortify your defensive line? Do you go for even more trench players? Or do you pair Tet McMillan with Brian Thomas Jr.? Oh, my God, I just imagine with him and Dyami Brown. There's more than one way to get this done. And I get excited when I think about the prospects of Brian Thomas Jr., Tet McMillan, who I think is going to be a very, very good player. The one thing you have to watch and monitor with all of this, there are a lot of ramifications that are, some of them are instant and some of them are down the line. They're in a good position to continue to fortify both trench spots, and possibly, if for some reason Travis Hunter, who in my opinion is the best player in the draft, and I have him the best player in the draft as a corner, not as a wide receiver. I have him as a corner, the best player in the draft, because of his instincts and his length and his ability to play on the ball. I am a firm believer in the fact that there are just some decisions that you're going to have to make at that pick. So they are going to be able to positively affect one of these units, either the wide receiver unit, the defensive back unit. You get the duality of that if you're talking about Travis Hunter, the interior of the offensive line or the tackle positions, and the interior of the defensive line. They can't go wrong. There's going to be a player there that the Jaguars can definitely use to help those areas. I think one of the things that's going to really, really matter for them is who blows them away, which one of those guys just grabs them, and it's not just about them taking him, it's about them not being able to live without him and bring him and his intangibles here to Jacksonville. Or it's going to be a matter of, okay, they're all kind of even. What can't we get in round 2 and 3? What is there in round 2 or 3? Do we take, if all things are even, do we take the guy here that we can get here that we can't get anywhere else, or get someone that's close to him? Will there be receivers in the 2nd and 3rd round that you think might have some upside that could make you go, Tet McMillan's a great player, but you know what? We're going to take that guy. Sure it is. I think Luther Burden might fall to the top of the 2nd round, and that'd be a mistake on a lot of people's part. But I've talked about other guys like Beck from TCU. I've talked about a number of wide receivers that I think are pretty good, and I don't think the difference between Tet McMillan and those guys is that wide. Offensive line, I don't know if the Jaguars are interested in the tackle position. I really can't tell. I know they got the 2 young guys. Basing it on free agency isn't going to tell you whether they like those guys a lot, because you're not going to find the type of tackle in free agency that you really want. Ronnie Stanley has been hurt. He's a little older. Some people think that Laramie Tunsil is washed, and Washington got a washed player. But he's a big money guy. You had to give up a 2nd round pick for. But normally you don't find guys of that ilk on the free agency market. You also don't find wide receivers like that on the free agency market. And today, as I record this podcast, you know, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase done teamed up and shook down their team for about $250 million. You get to the point now, if you take Tet McMillan, one of the things you got to deal with is that he's only a year behind Brian Thomas Jr., and you're going to end up paying both of them. But that's down the line. That's a down the line problem, right? It's going to be interesting to see what will happen. One thing I did find interesting from James Gladstone was when he was asked about positions that he did not address in free agency, one of the things that he said was, well, you got all of these draft picks, so you kind of need to leave room for them to fill in. And that made a lot of sense to me. And I'll tell you exactly why it made sense to me in a second here as we get to segment 2 of Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop managing your money and start building wealth. All in one convenience is what I love. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. To take control of your finances with Monarch Money, use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half your first year off. And today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. March Madness is here. It's right in your face. The bracket is done, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Picking my favorite NFL teams, my favorite college teams, I've got my eye on, believe it or not, the University of Florida and St. John's, both of them. Ain't no underdogs, man, and FanDuel will make it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel. $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, moving along here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. I'm going to talk about how you leave room for players drafted and how that in and of itself is a bold move. And it ties into segment 3, where we're going to talk about how they're not hedging their bets. They're going all in on themselves. And this thinking and this thought process is one of the reasons you can believe that that's true. Now, would I be lying if I said a little bit of me didn't see some of the videos, some of the all access videos that they're showing us, and I saw James Gladstone and Tony Boselli and Liam Cohen and a little bit of it. I saw some of the parts that I saw. I like what I saw. I like the relaxed nature of Gladstone. I like how Big Bo, Tony Boselli, the EVP, was involved. I like how Liam Cohen got really, really excited about somebody. I don't know who it was, but if I want to take a guess, it's probably either Diami Brown or Patrick McCarry, 2 of the 9 free agents that they signed. And I'm telling you, I got excited. But then, every time you get excitement on one shoulder, you get the little anti-excitement guy on the other shoulder, and he starts to tap at me. And he made me a little bit weary about something that I'm going to tell you. I went through a process of getting over it. And what that is I didn't see like an old veteran guy, and maybe that's just me being me, but I didn't see that grizzled up dude that's been there and done that. What I saw was 3 very young, smart, enthusiastic people, young in terms of the jobs that they're doing and the things that they have responsibility for. And I saw all first-timers. This is a first-time GM and a first-time EVP, a first-time executive period in the NFL, and first-time head coach. And I'm thinking, like, I hope the enthusiasm and I hope the new way of learning how to do things and all of that stuff, I really hope that takes up for or makes up for lack of experience and not having that old guy in the room. But I'm not that curmudgeon. I'm not the one that says stuff like there needs to be a grown man in the room and all of that stuff. No, I don't mind it at all, as long as everybody knows what they're doing. But I had to temper some of my excitement because I saw that. But the one thing I do like about him, there's a couple of things, but one thing I do like about him, he was asked the other day about positions that they did not address. And this is why I said I won't rule out tackle at number 5 if they feel like either Kelvin Banks or Will Campbell or Mimbu out of Missouri, if they're sitting there at number 5 and they get one of those guys that they believe is going to be an all-pro. And I'm more and more looking at it, it's going to be the Mimbu kid. That's the dude, the 6'4", 322. And I know he's built more like a guard, but there have been tackles like Trent Williams, Jason Peters that have had that same build with those long arms and those heavy trunk legs that have made really, really good tackles in the National Football League. So I'm not going to just assume that he won't be a great tackle. He's played right tackle for most of his life. But what if they decided to do that? They said they're going to leave room for the draft choices. And that's one thing that I've been kind of harping on with people when they do these the mocks involving free agency, and they don't leave room. This is like for everyone. I've actually had people do this following scenario. They know Armstead's moving back inside to his 3 technique. They know that's where Mason Smith is also scouted to project the play. They also want to move Trayvon Walker inside in a base 4-3, which would make him a 3 technique. And then they want to draft Mason Graham, who is probably best suited as a 3 technique. And I did that one day, and I even put the techniques up, and I said, how are you going to do that? Not only is it not smart, but you actually aren't leaving room to draft people to come into those positions. And so when Gladstone kind of said that the other day, I think he was talking to me, O'Brien, I almost jumped out of my seat with glee because he's absolutely right. And that's what I've been trying to tell you. It has to make sense. It's not just about getting names. This isn't basketball where positions are positionless sometimes. This isn't that. This isn't that you can have 2 guys with the same game and you can put them on the court and they'll figure it out like Luka and LeBron are figuring it out together, right? No, this ain't that. This is football where the positions, they are designated to be what they are, and they're designated to be what they are for a reason. And you have a salary cap, so you have an allocation of funds. And basically what Gladstone was saying was, and this is directed at Mia, but he was basically saying, make it make sense. We have to believe in some of the players that we have. BPA is fine. Best player is cool, right? And I think that that's one of the things that when people keep talking about Abdul Carter, and I probably take him too, and I probably try to figure it out. See, I take him, and I go back to something that I heard Coach Keith Sanchez of Locked On NFL Draft say. He said he when they compared him to Micah Parsons, they said, yeah, he's probably a better stack linebacker than Micah Parsons. That's an off-the-ball guy. So my thing is if he can play off the ball and he can play stack position and he can 9 wide as an edge rusher, if I drafted Abdul Howard, I would start him next to Foye Oluokun. And I moved Devin Lloyd, who's on the last year of his contract. And I'd send him on blitzes and I'd line him up in the A gap and I'd make him 9 wide. I would do to him what Dallas does to Micah Parsons. And Micah Parsons starts the game standing up at the linebacker position. If you're going to run a base 4-3, fine. But if it's going to be a 4-2-5, he'll be one of the 2 in the middle. That's what I do. If he's that good, I would take him, especially if everybody else is gone. But I'd also take Travis Hunter, and I'd also take Tet McMillan. So we got to see how many of those guys are on the board, and then the Jaguars are going to have to make a decision. And the decision might come down to something I said earlier. It might come down to we got to take now what we ain't going to be able to get later if all other things with those players in terms of being a culture fit or an ecosystem fit here in Jacksonville, if all of those things are even. But I like the fact that he is going to go into the draft thinking BPA, but he has admitted that there are positions that they need to address, and those positions will be addressed in the draft. And I think a lot of free agency was based on what can't we get, because when people say best player available, a lot of times it's like regardless of need. I think they have made it and lined it up so their need is going to be able to be addressed because they have identified what is in the draft and what isn't. What they couldn't get in the draft, they got in free agency. And now they know their needs in the draft are going to be met because they've already evaluated what that draft is heavy on. One of those things is wide receiver. The other one of those things is third running back. Something else is developmental offensive linemen. The defensive tackle bunch is about as deep as it gets in any year. And Mason, and trust me, that kid Mason Graham, he'd be a top 10 player in any draft. Okay, so this isn't like, when they say this is a weak draft that they're talking about him. They're not. They ain't talking about him. They ain't talking about Travis Hunter. They ain't talking about Abdul Carter. Some of the quarterbacks may not be up to what these other quarterbacks have been, and maybe some of the other positions, but they definitely aren't talking about those people. So yeah, they are going. It's bold because they already know the positions they're going to target, and they probably have bunches of guys slotted in certain spots. Okay, if this guy's not there, that's what we're going to do. Or we'll be able to get him, and then we'll move over this way in the third round and come back to that. I think they've already identified the type of people they want to be Jaguars, and they already know those positions are right now available on that depth chart. In order to do that, you have to not be able to, you have to be in the business of not hedging your bets. And in the past, we've seen GMs do that. I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, third final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. Make sure you guys check out that bracket breakdown on Fire TV. The hedging of bets. In the past, there were too many situations where I did not agree with the GM, Dave Caldwell, good friend of mine, but I didn't agree with him. He says, we'll get this guy until we get somebody better. I always kind of felt like, yeah, I feel you, but I think that's a bad way of framing it and looking at it. And if y'all disagree with me, that's fine. A lot of people do. There's no problem with that. Trent Baalke was never accountable for anything. Trent he never really explained his picks, but he would go out there and get guys in free agency, guys that he thought, but he would never go into what the reason why he brought those guys in here for. All he ever talked about was traits, never talked about football concepts, never talked about any of that stuff, never talked about guys' personalities. He just talked about their traits. And it was really like a cookie cutter, like one size fits all, as long as you're big and strong and you can get in here and they'll figure out what to do with you. The players sounded more like commodities as more than they did people. It sounded like just a number instead of a live, real human being with a personality that had those intangibles that James Gladstone talks about, and the personality. It sounds like they would really get guys in and try to shape guys into what they wanted them to be instead of going out and getting guys for who they were and using that thing that they are as a part of our DNA and our ecosystem and our process. Like, instead of changing their personality, say, yeah, we need that. We need a little bit of that, and bring it in and say, be yourself. And I think that's what they're going to do now. But it also signals to me that there's not going to be any bet hedging. We're not going to get this guy and then get another guy just in case he doesn't work out. No, they're going to get people to come in here and they're going to compete. And when those guys compete, they're going to choose the best guys who should be playing. And they believe in their ability to go out and get the right type of people. And it's not just backed by, well, I'm the smart, nobody's ever done this, I've got more experience. I had to imitate Trent one more time. It's not because of that. It's because of, we know who we are, who we want to be. We know the direction we want to go, and we have clearly identified the type of player and people that we need to be able to do that. And when you're being true to yourself like that, there is no need to hedge your bets. You know exactly who you want. You know why you go out and get them. That's why I said the other day, people have been saying, okay, who's your wish list? And I do mocks and I do mock free agencies, and and I throw it out there just for people to see what could happen and what could be available. But then when the team didn't sign one person, I think the only person I had on my list that they signed was Patrick McCarry. That's the only guy. And the reason I had him on my list was because of his versatility. So the thing with me was it's always been about, I want them to make sure that they get people. I want to let them tell the story. Whoever they get, then we can go back and revisit what they were looking for. Because make no mistake about it, when they sign people to be themselves. And they know exactly who they are and what they're getting. Just like that center from Tampa Bay, Hainsey. There was people talking about, hey, man, Hainsey might be available. And one of my friends that's a writer said, yeah, and he got benched last year. And Liam Cohen was the coach in the first year he got benched. But then Liam Cohen goes and signs him and makes him the Jaguars starting center. And people are like, okay, yeah. So now you realize Liam Cohen wasn't the one that made that call. That was whoever was making a call about who starts and who doesn't. And maybe it just means that Graham Barton was just that good. And they really went the best guy that's here is going to play. But it doesn't mean the other guy isn't any good because they didn't try to move him while he was on the last year of his deal. They kept him on the team. Liam Cohen probably feels like he can win with James Hainsey, right? So there's an understanding that they know exactly what they're getting when they bring him in here. And I think they also know exactly what they're looking for in the draft. They know the type of people they want. And that's half the battle, man. Instead of just drafting people because they're big and strong and hoping that they fit, everyone that they have on their list are guys that will fit this team, fit this culture. They have some intangibles that the team actually wants them to come in, and the team isn't going to necessarily make them adjust to the team. The team is going to adjust to the player. I love it. I love the confidence that they have in their ability to select players. If they work, they work. If they don't, they don't. It'll all be built on competition. Even if they pass up guys that are good, it should not matter whether or not those guys are good or not. And they go on to be good. Gladstone even said something like that. Even if we don't see eye to eye about a player and that person goes on to have a great career, don't worry about it. Just draft the guys that you are comfortable with your team, that have something to do with the culture of your team. And that should be enough. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm happy to see if it's going to work. And you guys should be happy to see if it's going to work also. We'll have more. We'll keep doing these player profiles of the guys that can be top 5 picks with the Jaguars. Tet McMillan was our guy today. Now, make sure y'all understand something. These receivers, they're making a lot of money these days. But now Derek Stingley just got $30 million a year. So now these corners are making a lot of money. So keep that in mind when y'all say whether you want Travis Hunter to be a wide receiver or a cornerback. The $30 million is, if you're good, you're going to get paid that kind of money anyway. Make sure you guys tap in each and every day to Locked On NFL Draft with my man Damian Parsons as well as Keith Sanchez. Those guys do it as good as anybody in the business. You got it right here on Locked On NFL Draft. Make sure you tap into that each and every day and do not miss an episode. All right, I'm Tony Wiggins. We'll keep looking at these top 5 guys, and then maybe next week we'll start looking down at some trade down opportunities and options that the Jaguars might have. Until then, you guys take care. We'll see you next time.